I'd like to acknowledge that this episode of Teachcast was recorded on the homelands of the Darug people. I'd like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening to Teachcast today.
Welcome to Teachcast, a podcast by teachers for teachers. I'm Shannon and
I'm Siobhan.
On this episode of Teachcast, we are joined by Sarah, who is an assistant principal on the lands of the Gadigal people and the Wangal people of the Eora Nation. She's also known on social media as Gifted and Talented Teacher, so you may follow her or you may be familiar with her content already. And she's here with us today to talk all things leadership journey, talk a little bit about content creation, you know, how that sparks joy, and just about her teaching journey in general. So thanks so much for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you for having me today. I'm so excited.
We're excited to have you.
Thank you.
Before we get into the nitty gritty, let's do a little warm up, a little rapid fire.
All right, let's do it.
This or that
Hit me with
edition.
the hard stuff. Okay.
All right, hit you with the hard stuff. You ready? Bus duty or canteen duty?
Oh, we don't have canteen duty, so I'm going to take whatever that
Okay.
is.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think
like
because
that.
bus duty is after school, but it's
Yeah.
rapid fire, so let's keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Shannon,
cool.
what are you?
I'm going to say canteen duty also. I
Yeah.
love knowing what everyone's getting. I'm the nosy Nancy at the top of the line.
Yeah.
Good morning. How are we going? What are we getting today at the shop?
I'm a bus duty because in high school it's just like one and done, 10-minute duty and then
Okay.
end of the day. So yeah, we love bus duty over here compared to canteen. They're a bit ravenous at that time.
Aren't we all?
Okay, controversial. Tomato sauce. Do you keep it in the cupboard or the fridge?
I know this is controversial, and I put it in the fridge.
No, I'm a fridge.
I'm a fridge girl too.
I'm in a safe space.
Yeah,
This
you
is
are.
good.
Yeah.
Welcome to Teachcast, where it's safe for wherever your condiments want to be held.
All right, digital planner or paper planner?
Paper planner.
Yeah.
I've tried
Okay.
digital programming, digital planning. I've done it, but I keep coming back to paper.
Paper.
I think it's the physicality of taking it around the classroom and being able just to write notes and be
Yeah.
really messy and chaotic with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about you guys?
Yeah, paper.
Yeah.
Digital.
I'm digital. All the way. I'm a
Digital
digital
girl.
girl.
Yeah.
You will never catch me with a piece of paper. Like if someone says, "Do you have a pen in your handbag?"
Yeah.
There's no pen to be
There's
found.
no pen or paper.
I've
Yep.
got a phone. It has a notes app. We can use that.
The notes app is fire. I'll give you that. Yeah.
We like
But I
notes
can't
app.
help you with a scrap of paper or a pen. It's not going to be found in my bag.
Fair.
And lastly, worksheets or slides?
Oh, slides. And I say that with hesitation because
Yeah.
you
You don't want to overuse the
you
slides.
don't want to over. They're a tool. They're
Yeah,
a tool
correct.
for teaching. They're not teaching. But
Correct.
and I think with the digital world that we're moving towards and in, people lean into them. I think sometimes a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll go with slides. Disclaimer.
I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
slides with the
Beautiful.
disclaimer as well
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
What are you? Slides with the disclaimer?
Look, I was really fond of a OneNote, so if I can use
yeah.
that as my slides, I was
Okay.
never a PowerPoint girl. I felt like I got really fixated on making it look the best it could be and sort of lost myself in the slides.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, with OneNote, I felt like I had the creativity to sort of like make it engaging, have my images and my beautiful text, but like could draw all over it as well. And I know
Yeah.
you can do that with PowerPoint,
Yeah.
but that was just me.
Yeah. I suppose let's sort of find out a bit more about yourself and why you chose teaching as a career. I mean, everyone has a story, so
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear what yours is.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in terms of teaching, the teaching profession, it was something that I knew I always wanted to do. I think sometimes, you know, when we ask kids, what do you want to be when you're older, it's a little bit too early. But in my heart, I felt like I wanted to be a teacher. And that stuck with me throughout high school. And I think it really comes back to having teachers at a certain point in my life that I really needed. I didn't realize at the time, but reflecting back, they were everything, that I needed all in one. And it's not, it's funny, it's not necessarily the teaching and the learning that I think back and reflect on and go, wow, that was powerful. It's how they made me feel.
Yeah.
And I still carry that through with me into my job. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you one of those little ones who was playing with your teddies and had your little whiteboard playing teacher?
Almost not that bad. I thought where you were going with that one was, were you one of those kids who, you know, was, for lack of a better word, teacher's pet, you know, like so willing to help and do you need me to do anything?
Praise myself,
Yeah,
and helping the teacher.
Yeah, that was
bit of a
me.
kick.
So it was just a happy place.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So no, I didn't have the setup in the class, in the bedroom with, you know, the whiteboard and the teddy bears as such. But no, it was just a good place, and I think that's why we as teachers focus in on that learning environment, because it does make a difference. For kids.
Yeah, I think it's nice to hear your story, and I was always like quite jealous of people that had like just sort of knew what they wanted to do. Like I myself, I didn't really know that I wanted to be a teacher. I sort of like applied for a few different university degrees, didn't really know what direction I wanted to go in. I feel like when you're 17 in year 12,
it's hard.
Siobhan can probably talk to this, teaching year 12 students, like you're so young to be making those decisions. So it's, you know, one of those careers that you can go and do a different degree and you can do a master's of teaching a little bit later after that undergraduate degree, and you can come in and become a teacher, you know, once you've sort of found your feet a little bit more in life. So it's cool. There's a lot of different pathways, I suppose, to becoming a teacher.
And a lot of different reasons as to why people become teachers.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's so valid.
Which is what the kids benefit from.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'd be interested to hear about your journey from university teacher now to assistant principal, and what that university student to assistant principal.
Yeah, different person.
And what that looked like.
Yeah. So I had just admittedly really challenging prac experiences, like going out into the classroom for the first time and taking all that you've learnt at university and applying that. They are two different things, my goodness. I found it, really challenging. I went home exhausted. I went home drained. I did wonder, is this the profession
fit for me?
For me, yeah. But I think that's why you have those practical experiences, right? So, you know, it's those times that it's really important to have a mentor, someone to guide you, for you to ask all the questions, all the, you know, I won't say silly questions, because no question is a silly question. So I found my feet slowly but surely on my prac experiences, and I was so excited to become a casual teacher. Like, I know it's so daunting, and I did, you know, admittedly think waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning,
wait for a text,
being told you're on kindergarten, or, you know, daunting, absolutely, but so exciting. And I went around and I handed out my CV, my resume to local schools, and before I kind of knew it, I was on blocks, and I was like, okay, the ball's rolling, I can do this. And all my experiences were positive. I had my first year and a half a little bit all over the place, in that I was an RFF provider, I was taking groups of enrichment kids, I was teaching dance. You don't want to see these hips move.
Shannon has such a similar story.
Oh gosh, because you say yes to lots of different things.
I feel left out that I've never been offered to take the dance group at school.
I can organise something.
It's trending on this podcast at the moment. Like, we have guests and they'll talk about the dance club, and I'm like, been there,
done that. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah,
I'm personally the like year 9 boys OzTag new fanatic. Yeah, that was where my skill set really thrived.
Oh goodness, it's like that, isn't it? You say yes to so many different things, and before you know it, I won't say you're an expert, but here we are.
I mean, if you see me up there, 2-step, 1-step, we were moving.
This isn't just audio, it's visual as well, so we might end on that note.
Might give you all a jig
Make a
later.
note of that.
But yeah, so I was saying yes to lots and lots of different things. And look, before I knew it, I had a class of my own, which was just the most exciting thing. It was a year 4 class. I still remember every single one of those kids. But it was those early days where, similar to wanting to be a teacher and knowing I wanted to be an executive, and I knew that. I was really passionate about literacy and numeracy and getting it right. I was fortunate enough, a bit of a shout out to Oak Hill Drive Public School, to come from a high-performing, excelling school. When you look at the school excellence framework, they're excelling across the domains. So to be mentored by exceptional leadership really put me in a good place of what it looks like to be an exceptional teacher, and to really make sure that I was confident in my craft, and I had that down before I was ready to move up and on, because it's not a race and it's not about that. And it's really important to be a really good teacher before you step into leadership. Sure, you can start thinking about it, but it's really important to fall back on the standards and reflect on that quality teaching in the classroom. So I was really fortunate to be in that kind of environment, and I then, landed a permanent classroom teacher position at a different school. Gosh, it's hard saying goodbye.
Isn't it? It's the tears.
I have that connection to my first school, Carringbar High School. That was it was so hard to leave. I think we had a goodbye morning tea and I couldn't even say a speech because I just cried the whole time.
Absolutely.
Everyone's probably like, this
is your home, and they're your little family.
This person's crazy.
Family.
But it meant, that that's sort of like your first home in teaching, and it means a lot.
absolutely.
Like it's where you grow, where you find your feet.
Yeah.
There's connections forever. So it is
Yeah,
difficult
and
to
you
move
also
on.
think often, I'm going off on a tangent now, but you think that first school that you're at is teaching.
Yeah.
Like we're talking different contexts,
Correct.
we're talking different leadership styles, we're talking different kids, different communities, different principles. Principles make a massive, massive difference. And you know,
different expectations.
Yeah, and I think any beginning teacher, any teacher out there who's kind of thinking, "Oh, is change for me?" or like, you know, the profession is changing.
Or is this it? Is this all that there is?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
It's like, no, you know, shake it up, disrupt that linear path and look elsewhere. It's so scary, but it's so rewarding, you know. So I think there's power in change, my goodness. But yeah, as soon as I got to my new school, I was bold and I was bold, yes. However, did I pace up and down the corridor before I went into the principal's office? Yes.
Of course.
But I asserted myself to the principal and I just said, hey, look, I'm really passionate about leadership. It's a journey that I would like to be on. And I think having that conversation just put me in the forefront of her thinking if and when something came up. And sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
And I then fell into relieving assistant principal and continued on my journey and was always, you know, looking to do things that impact whole school. Yes, my priority was maximising the progress, the well-being of the kids in my
students,
class, but I just naturally had an urge to do that beyond the four walls of my classroom.
You can do that and
right?
some. That's probably how you felt, right?
Yeah. And to
I
bring
like
a
how
team.
you said to talk to your principal, because Siobhan and I have spoken a little bit on the podcast about if you are interested in leadership early on in your career, your professional development plan is a wonderful place to start having that conversation around goals that you make for yourself professionally with your supervisor, you know, going and talking to the principal. There's wonderful opportunities that can be had can be taken up from those conversations or that can be, you know, made available or put into people's minds that that's what you're looking for to sort of upskill in that area. And I think that's really valid what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think the Department of Education has come such a long way in that, you know, they have the School Leadership Institute partnering with University of Wollongong, partnering with University of Newcastle, and they have the School Leadership Identification Framework. So school teachers can actually use that framework to self-identify and approach principals. It gives them a platform to have that conversation.
They have their own podcast as well, the School Leadership Institute. And one of my friends, she, like, in going for assistant principal roles, listened to that podcast and sort of equipped herself with even the meta language of leadership and what that looked like and, you know, get a different perspective. So there's so many valuable resources out there for developing your leadership potential.
And
definitely.
goodness, I can't believe I'm about to use this phrase, but back in my day, when I was going for the leadership positions, I didn't have that framework. And even, I think in the last, I want to say 12 months, maybe 24 months, they've released the middle leadership role description.
Yes. Yeah. Middle
Brand
leaders
new,
role
I know.
description.
Brand spanking. So to now have a document that tells you exactly what's expected of your role, clarity, moving in, like wanting to step into it, or if you're in it to reflect, it's incredible. So there are certainly some powerful tools floating around the department to give people in those positions something to grab onto and go, right, where am I at and where do I need to get to next?
To me, sort of the whole theme of what you're telling us about, that journey from university student to assistant principal and everything in between, the whole theme to me sounds like being out of your comfort zone. And I feel like that's not something that everyone can maybe do, feel that they're not equipped to do so. So I would be interested to hear if you have any advice, because it's obviously not easy, right? It's you might not be a person that's like, I'm taking risks every day of my life. Like, I would assume that there's some rhyme or reason or some sort of thought process that goes behind how I'm going to take risks.
Yeah, isn't that an
I'm
interesting
sort of
observation?
interested to hear about if you have advice for people who are looking to step out of their comfort zone but might not be able to take that step.
Yeah, I guess it's really interesting you've observed that firstly, and secondly, the reason I find it interesting is because often people come to me when they're not sure about taking a risk, and the way that I see it, because I have taken risks before and they haven't paid off, but there is such beautiful learning in it.
Definitely.
I don't ever see something not eventuating as a bad thing. I have my moments. I get upset. I ask, why this, why that?
We're only human.
Aren't we? And I just stop for a moment. Don't get me wrong. I feel the feelings. I have my processing time. Yeah. But after that, I kind of just go, what can I take away from this experience, and what can I do to better myself? Which isn't easy. I've spoken to a lot of teachers about the application process in terms of obtaining permanency and what it feels like to spend hours and hours and hours writing a CV for it not to be successful and or for you to go to interview and not experience success. And you cannot say to those people, if anyone said it to me, you can't say, oh, well, the silver lining is you've got some feedback, off you go on to the next one. It just doesn't work like that. So that advice is really hard to take on board. But once you do process all of the emotion associated with not being successful, to take away, those next steps for you, I think it's such a powerful thing. I think why not? And I do believe it's enabled me to keep going, keep taking risks.
Putting yourself in that position and seeing what you can grasp from it, I think is really important. It's something that, like my own personal regret, even through university, was not doing a rural practicum. I only was ever placed at schools close to my home, and like, woohoo, how convenient. But then for my own personal development,
I agree.
I almost feel like I didn't get to experience that community. And for a lot of people, they could go, well, now it's too late. Like, of course, for a lot of people, it might be, but for some, it's never too late. So I would say that, my general advice is always, within reason, step out of your comfort zone and see what the department can bring to you in that respect, because you're going to be exposed to new people, new communities, new types of lessons, new ways of delivering curriculum. So it's, if anything, you're gaining all of that experience from stepping out of your comfort
you develop
zone.
As a teacher. Absolutely. You get to decide on what you do and don't like and what works for you and what doesn't. And I always say opportunities breed opportunities. So to go out, and have that opportunity, you're only going to meet more amazing people. And experience more
Touching on
amazing things.
Opportunities, I think it's really valuable for our audience who potentially are pre-service teachers, beginning teachers. What are some opportunities you took early on in your teaching career that sort of shaped who you are today as a teacher?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Other than dance group.
Which
is a formative part of your career journey.
Yes, honestly, I would say I owe a lot to that dance group.
It's brought you here today, specifically.
It's really humbled me.
You're doing the TeachCast intro as a dance routine, aren't you?
Absolutely. We're actually learning a whole routine.
There's a reel in that. It's interesting you asked this question because I felt like this was going to come up. I reflected on it and would I change my journey? No. My however is that I took on a lot. I took on so much.
It's a common thread, I think, between a lot of people.
Yeah, because
even whether you're in a temporary or permanent capacity, either way, you're always trying to prove yourself.
Yeah.
So
you want to show that you're contributing. You want to help out team members. You want to be the yes person. But I did go through my first years as a people pleaser. And I am only now, in the last 12 months, coming to terms with the fact that it is okay to say no, and it is okay to have...
No is powerful.
Oh, yeah, and it's a sentence in itself.
It is an answer in itself.
No, thank you, maybe next time.
Yeah, or I don't have capacity for that right now.
Thanks for thinking of me.
So I did. I took on a lot, and I think because I had that leadership, as we were talking about before, that leadership journey in mind, I thought, okay, what does it look like to take on roles whole school? How can I show that I have capacity to do X, Y, Z? So did I start that stage 2 swim school? Yeah, I did. Did I do the sports coordinator role when I had my very first class? I did. Which was massive, organising
a whole school
community
initiative.
Sport, all of that, kind of stuff, for lack of a better word. So taking on opportunities meant that I got to work with more people. I have so many mentors, people who come to mind, like hours after school sitting in my classroom, planning with me, showing me, supporting me. This is where you find this in the sports storeroom. This is what we do. This is what you could do differently.
But even things like writing a risk assessment.
Oh, a risk assessment.
Or like a variation to routine, for example, if you are in a bigger school and it has a huge impact. Like, we often joke that we have so many other hats that we wear as teachers, but I speak to friends who aren't in the teaching profession. They're like, you are also an events coordinator when you explain what goes into these. And we're not really taught those skills at university.
No.
And at the end of the day, you're doing it for your students.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. And it's additional, it's extra, and you do it to give your kids opportunities. You do it not for the pay, not to be noted, not to be...
Not for the accolades.
No.
They're
You
nice
just do
though.
it.
They are nice.
I wouldn't mind a merit certificate every now and again.
Wouldn't mind a call up on stage. No, and so there's no argument about it. You do it for the kids. So taking on those opportunities, I did that for the kids. I built incredible relationships within the community, and it was rewarding. I'm just thinking of my first school, which is why I say was. And it's part of teaching. It's a part of it that needs to be recognised. I just think when you're starting out, it is okay to be in the classroom and just focus in on building confidence as a teacher.
For sure. Yeah.
And when you are approached to say, so-and-so's gone on leave and now someone needs to organise the spelling bee.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for thinking of me. I just don't have capacity for it at this moment in time. Do you think that, a couple of months down the track, I could look at doing
reconsidered or
something else?
Assisting, shadowing. I mean, or it can just be a firm no. I don't have the capacity right now. I'm still finding my feet, and that's fine. I don't think there's any shame in building your craft within the classroom before you go and add an additional layer. Yeah. In fact, I would recommend it to beginning teachers for sure.
Yeah. And I know principals who are so supportive of that notion. Like, no, beginning teacher first out. Yeah. Even beginning teachers who have mentors, that should be one of the things that they're teaching them straight out, that it is okay to say no.
I was actually going to ask a question about, you were speaking mentorship, being a mentor, but then also applying for roles. And I feel like the pinpoint in between there might be about, and something our listeners would be interested in, is writing an application.
Yes.
And where do you go to for help? Are you expected to do it on your own?
Because it's not something you're necessarily taught at university.
No, it's not. And it's not always something that people are well versed in a school context, because they're in the school context, right? They've done it and they've moved on from it, or, they're not necessarily looking around. My best piece of advice, and something I just did by default, was I used my notes app and I just, put a header saying CV/resume, because when it comes to sitting down and writing your application, it's almost like I've done nothing.
Yeah, what do I actually do?
I teach.
Yeah.
And and then you have your beautiful colleagues around you who are like, no, you started that swim scheme. Remember you did the sports coordinator. You were dance instructor. Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have these moments of like, oh yes. Yeah. And I think if you just keep track of it over time, even if it feels trivial in the moment, in terms of organisation.
One of my friends, Sophie, who's also a primary school teacher, she taught me that herself, and she learnt it from one of her mentors. But she would set up just a monthly table, Jan all the way to December, and would just write her key achievements each month in there, and look back on that. It's a good way, A, to reflect, but B, to remember what you did and the impact that it had.
Absolutely.
So I think that's actually a really great piece of advice, because then when she came to writing her application, she could just go, oh, okay, well, this question's asking me about how I use technology. Yeah. So she'd go back and look at her monthly grid, and it was like, oh, that one aligns. And I was the computer coordinator, and I got, one-to-one devices in the school or something.
Yeah.
So I think that's, a really key piece of advice.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, every new year I start a new doc, and I just scroll back through it. And even if I don't use it for an application purpose, I'm like,
for your own, also for your own
personal,
like a
reflection.
Growth.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, and also the Department of Education more recently than not have like a tab on their page called application process. Yeah. And if you go to that, there are so many different videos, there are so many different tips and tricks to help you write your CV. And the game has kind of changed in more recent years, which I'm sure you guys know, in terms of specific fonts, specific sizing margins, and your CV unfortunately can be put in the bin because of a font size. So you've
and
really
that's why like you just mentioned that resource in the department, it's so valuable to hop on there and have a look.
On our webpage, we do have writing a great application, it's called, and what you're referring to there is called the merit selection procedure. Like font size, business standard business margins, even the fact that the application has to be submitted as a PDF. I think that if people are equipped and have that knowledge and know at the very minimum that that's what's expected in the CV in terms of its structure, the content of the CV is a whole different story.
Exactly.
Especially when you are a beginning teacher, there are some people who they're really, really keen on getting permanent, substantive, ongoing employment with the department. And these are the sort of tips and tricks that are so valuable for them in their first couple of years, documenting what they've achieved and all those opportunities that they've taken and jumped in with. It's really important to reflect and note them down for your CV.
Yeah, absolutely. And another tip that I have is I remember, and you probably got them, people listening probably received them, the emails from senior executives saying, hey, there's a professional learning that's happening on Wednesday on the 14th of November. That's not a thing, that's made up. And
Sarah will be hosting one.
That's it, come along, tea and coffee. No, and, it's an hour after school. If you're free, go for it. And you kind of think, oh, goodness, I am exhausted. I've got this happening.
Yeah.
And, there are boundaries that need to be put in place as teachers. I understand that. My however to that is that I did go along to those. Tim, who is still in the Department of Education, he has no idea, but has helped me in terms of me sitting an interview and getting my job. One really specific example is he always said, keep your hands inside the box. And I sit in my interviews.
What does that mean?
And I take that with me. I keep my hands inside this little box in front of me because I don't want to keep my hands under the table
Approachable.
and look nervous. I don't want to have my arms wide and, overwhelming, but I want to be personable. I want to be relatable. And when I talk to people, I want them to feel comfortable. And if I keep my hands inside the box, and I remember he presented that, and don't get me wrong, some people looked at each other like, what's he talking about? But there were the people in the room like me who were like, huh. Yeah. And I took that away with me.
Do you know, I have a really, this, you've just ignited a core memory within me. My mum's a librarian, so
amazing.
Anything that I want information on should just give me a book.
Brilliant.
I
need her
Mum, I'm
contact
having this
details.
issue, and she's like, here's a book, read about it. I'll give you my advice, but also here's the literature on it. But when she was applying for job interviews, going for a new position, she read every single how to nail a job interview book that there is on the planet, and that was in there, keeping your hands up on the table inside the box.
There you go.
And so I think that it's a simple strategy, it is a really good way to show that you are approachable, friendly, and comfortable. Yeah. Even if you might not feel comfortable. Yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. And also these after school sessions that went for an hour, you've got executives in the room, people who care, people who want you to get from A to B, and people who have seen others do it and they've clearly done it themselves. So there's merit in that, and asking them questions and sitting with them. I received all sorts of different handouts of, what you should have in a CV versus what you shouldn't. So, I think those opportunities, if and when you can, network, but also get out to those beginning teacher meetings, and ask those questions. Yeah. Bask in the expertise.
Really valuable.
Yeah.
Have you found yourself, as in your assistant principal role, have you had the opportunity to mentor beginning teachers?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I have beginning teachers come through, various different teams that I have led. And one of the best things is being a mentor.
Yeah.
Because it's more just going back to basics and going, this is my bread and butter of teaching and this is what I need to prioritize. The rest can simply wait. Because I think we get so absorbed in everything else, like you were saying, risk assessments and camps and organisation and all of that stuff. But it's the teaching that is our priority, and moving student learning forward and looking after student wellbeing.
Have you learnt from a mentor and then they've passed that down to you, and you've then passed that down and they'll pass it down?
We hope. In the first school that I was at, I was told to find someone who is not an executive, who's not a leader, because you need to have those vulnerable conversations. You need to have, a close the door, this is what's going on. I really need your support. You need to be vulnerable. You need someone who's going to understand you. So I had an incredible mentor, Robin. She was so experienced in the classroom. And I knew that I could go to her about anything, and had the answer to everything. She really did. Sorry, I'm just thinking about her now. She was just such a beautiful...
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, such a beautiful woman. And she really helped me when things got too much. And she even, went into bat for me, or went in and spoke to senior executive when things were too much at certain times.
Because as a beginning teacher, that is quite daunting to speak to executive. And I think it's all, it's easily said for people who have a couple years under their belt sometimes, not in every context obviously, but you have a bit more confidence. But as a beginning teacher, that's a big thing to go and talk to a deputy or to talk to a principal, no matter how supportive they are. I think it's just that sort of you almost put a barrier between yourself and exec sometimes when you're fresh.
You're spot on, because you want to be seen as capable and coping when really you're just keeping your head above water.
Yeah, and you need help, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the power of a mentor, right? That's what Robin was to you. And I think that, for me, my entire faculty in my first year. Like, they all became my unofficial mentors.
That's beautiful.
But I think it's really important to find your formal mentor and then your
Yeah.
informal mentors, like you
Yeah.
were saying.
Yeah.
My mentor was also called Robin, so something must be in the air. My very
That's
first
beautiful.
mentor, and I was in awe of her when she would come into my classroom and do demonstration lessons, for example. I would just sit like a little sponge. Like, almost I wanted to cross my legs and sit like the students because I was just like, wow.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, and I honestly felt like she had all the answers. And it
you
was,
do feel like that, don't you? 'Cause
I
you
was
have
so
many
lucky
questions.
to have someone in my corner that was mentoring me, who was there supporting me with so much knowledge and experience.
Yeah, no, I feel that immensely. And just you talking about watching somebody else teach is so important in those first years. I was fortunate enough. It was interesting. Halfway through the year, we reached a certain amount of numbers in terms of students in the school. So we were then allowed to form another class. I think because it was halfway through the year, it was a really difficult decision splitting up the year 6 cohort because they had found their teacher. So they said, okay, instead of taking students out of classes and forming another class for Sarah to be the teacher, Sarah can team teach across the year 6 classes. And that was the best. I got to see so many different, and team teach with them as well.
What an opportunity.
It really was. And it was at, those times where I'm like, that is something I probably won't do in my career. And on the flip side, that is amazing. I would never have thought to have done it that way. And Robin was one of those teachers who, really taught me so much about grouping kids, about sentence structure, all of those things I fall back on even now.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you're really passionate about literacy and numeracy. Is there a key learning area that you sort of are like, get really hyped to teach?
That is a great question. This isn't answering your question, but the first thing that comes to mind in terms of being really hyped to teach and really excited is your high potential gifted kids, in terms of there's so much research associated with how to teach those kids, how to honour their giftedness. And when you do it correctly and in the right way and fall back on the research and bring it into the practical side of the classroom, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It is so incredible. So in terms of that realm, maths is probably my go-to, because I think sometimes when people think enrichment, they think up and on. And then when they think about expansion of knowledge, but how? How do I do that? And when you do it and you do it well, it's a game changer.
Yeah, and you see those students soar.
Yeah.
So to dig a little bit deeper into that, you have been on an opportunity class for a number of years.
Yeah.
I myself have taught an opportunity class, and Siobhan here has taught at a selective high school.
I love it.
So we all have a really
We know what
big
that's like.
passion for
high potential gifted education.
Absolutely, and have lived and breathed with those students for many years, and that was definitely where I found my niche in my career, and it was where my heart was like, I thrived the most as a teacher because I just found such a passion for it.
Yeah.
And those students, you're right, when they are taught in a way that, makes sense to them and they understand that connection with the real world is so important, they absolutely just flourish, and it's the most amazing thing to see them grow.
And credit to the kids as well, because in those contexts, we really are the facilitator of the learning.
Yeah.
So when they align with it and produce something incredible, it's like, this is all you. And they're like, oh no, but you're my great teacher. Like, you're the one who helped me get from A to B. It's like, no.
That was all.
This is you,
This is
and
very
you're
amazing.
incredible. Yeah.
I love
So,
this.
those moments really,
rewarding.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
For sure.
I think we've lived the same life. Mentor Robin,
Maybe.
OC. Yeah.
Who are you really?
Yeah, what's going on? Is this
Are you
one of
her
those
and
things?
she's you?
And we've got like Siobhan, Shannon, Sarah, the 3 S's here. Something's going on.
I love it.
We love it.
I think we've touched on a lot of really good content today for those who are
I hope.
wanting to step into the industry or the profession, I should say, of becoming a teacher. What would your piece of advice be for someone who's thinking about jumping in, maybe taking up teaching, going and studying at university?
My advice for someone who is thinking about teaching, it is the most rewarding, incredible job. Like, there's nothing out there quite like it. The relationships that you make across the community, across a school, with kids is unmatched. And it is one of those professions that the more you give, the more is consumed. So it is about finding those boundaries, But you can do that, and that is possible. And when it's done, you're soaring, you're flying. And there's a reason that people are fueled by teaching. There's a reason that there are people whose lives are changed and find so much joy in waking up on a Monday, which is why Mondays are my favorite. And getting into the classroom and seeing those smiling faces back at you, ready to learn. You know exactly where each of them are at in terms of their learning, in terms of their well-being, and
where
you're
they are after school as well. Yeah.
That's it.
Bumping
Over the
into
holidays,
them at the shops, you're like, whoa, you're tall, and what are you doing
it's
now?
a Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And you follow those journeys throughout, and when you're all in, it's a game changer. So, it's an incredible profession.
We couldn't agree more.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Snaps and claps. And you said soaring, flying, and I was like, there's not a star in
There's a dance in that.
High Bolton.
We're showing our age with High School Musical.
yeah,
I
that was
put it on.
favourite.
You will laugh at this. I put
yeah.
it on the bus on the way to Stage 3 camp in
I love
Canberra.
that.
And
Did
the
they all say,
students
"What is
turned to me and
this?"
said,
What is this?
What is this? And myself and the
no.
other teacher at the time, Miss Morley,
offensive.
we were at the front of the bus and we asked the
Did
bus
you go,
driver.
it's a classic?
We did, and we took the microphone, we started singing along,
Yeah,
made it
good.
absolute musical right here on the bus.
I love it. Did you do that?
And what a joyous occasion it was altogether. I mean, I say that, the students probably
Subjective.
felt otherwise.
That's so funny.
But no, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's
On
been
the
a pleasure.
Teachcast couch today. We've really loved chatting with you. And
Thank you.
hopefully, everyone at home listening will get something from this episode that they can use and bring into their classroom or use to help with their CV as well.
Yeah,
so we really
brilliant.
appreciate it.
Thank you both.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Teachcast, where we explore the dynamic world of education. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available. You can find us on social media via our handle @TeachNewSouthWales. Until next time, keep learning, keep teaching, and keep making a difference. Teachcast is a podcast by the Teach New South Wales team from the New South Wales Department of Education.